Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. We are in session 3 entitled Delivered from Egypt. And our key idea this week is God delivers his people from their bondage. And we're in Exodus chapter 12, verses 21 through 32. We're going to start off by asking the question, how far back does your favorite Christmas tradition go? And how did it get started? How has someone in your family responded when someone suggested doing something other than your tradition, something new or different related to that tradition? And why is it hard to change traditions? Why is it hard for us to change when it comes to especially family holiday traditions? Well, my family, for Christmas, we don't really have anything other than adults do white elephant Christmas. We don't get gifts for the other adults. We'll get one gift, male or female, depending on what you are, what the participant is. And then you just participate in white elephant. And it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of laughs that happen. And that's a good time. Our biggest tradition used to be on New Year's Eve, we would make pizza together, and we would all go to my grandmother's house and make pizza and do it together, cooking the pizzas and eating and just having a good time. That started to fall away just a couple of years ago. After Grace and I got married, there were just so many people who were busy and had moved away, moved to other towns. It was hard to get everyone together. And so what Grace and I did was we felt like we could get more quality time with my grandparents by going New Year's Day instead of New Year's Eve. That way we can see our friends and maybe my mom or Carly or whomever, and on New Year's Eve, and then going to Grandma and Papa's on New Year's Day to see them and get quality time with them. And then we ate leftover pizza if they did pizza the night before. And it's been good doing that the last few years. I imagine Grace and I will do something similar this year, even with Papa being gone this year, Grandma being by herself. That seems like something that we will do in order to spend some time with Grandma. Anyway, everyone observes traditions, Christmas traditions, holiday traditions, what have you. We'll exchange gifts, or we will do it on Christmas morning or Christmas Eve the night before. Some families have an artificial tree. Some have a real tree. But traditions matter. They bind us together. They cause us to cling together, and they give us some common ground to stand on. And so when we look at today's Sunday school lesson, we're going to be looking at the forming of the tradition of Passover and the Passover feast and the Passover lamb and the significance of it. And so we're skipping almost all of the plagues. We're actually picking up right during or right at the beginning of the 10th plague, the plague of death of every firstborn in Egypt. Firstborn male, excuse me. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. And we're going to be seeing how Israel responds to this new tradition that is starting in the nation of Israel. So let's begin reading there in verse 21, chapter 12, 21, and we'll read through 32, and then we will answer some questions about it. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go select an animal from the flock according to your families and slaughter the Passover animal. Take a cluster of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and brush the lintel of the 2 doorposts with some blood of the basin. Now none of you may go out the door of his house until morning. When the Lord passes through to strike Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, he will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you. Keep this command permanently as a statute for you and for your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, you are to observe this ceremony. When your children ask you, 'What does this ceremony mean to you?' you are to reply, 'It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, for he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians and he spared our homes.' So the people knelt low and worshipped. And then the Israelites went and did this. They did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. Now at midnight, the Lord struck every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and every firstborn of all of the livestock. During the night, Pharaoh got up, he along with all of his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud wailing throughout Egypt because there wasn't a house without someone dead. He summoned Moses and Aaron during the night and said, "Get out immediately from among my people, both you and the Israelites. Go and worship the Lord as you have said. Take even your flocks and your herds as you have asked, and leave, and also bless me." So the Lord has hardened Pharaoh's heart for many weeks during all of these plagues. And finally, the final straw was the death of his son. And Pharaoh says, "Go, leave." And God prepared and provided a way for Israel to be protected from this, from the so-called destroyer here in verse 23. And so that's what we're going to be looking at, is this tradition that was established here to teach future generations of the mercy and the grace of the Lord in his protection of Israel and in his plague on Egypt to convince Pharaoh to let his people go. So let's start looking at our instruction here. This is verses 21 through 23. Let's read these verses again together. Then Moses summoned all of the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go select an animal from the flock according to your families and slaughter the Passover animal. Take a cluster of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and brush the lintel and the 2 doorposts with some of the blood in the basin. None of you may go out the door of his house until morning. When the Lord passes through to strike Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, he will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you." So it's called Passover because the angel of death that God sent, this plague of death of the firstborn that God sent, would literally pass over the houses of the Israelites. And so the word there for destroyer in verse 23, this term could be used to describe an invading army, but in this context, it's referring to God or an angel sent at God's command. So this is an angel that is going from house to house, home to home, and killing every firstborn male to finally convince Egypt or Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. But Moses gives them some instruction. He tells them how to prepare their house. He tells them, none of you may go out through the door. Protection was guaranteed as long as you were inside. If you were outside, you would be subject to God's punishment and the same judgment as the Egyptians. So after having survived the plagues, what do you imagine the Hebrew people thought as they heard these instructions? As they had survived all of the other plagues before, and they're hearing this and they're going, "Oh, this is real. This is stepping up a notch. This is no longer frogs or anything else. This is getting real here. God is about to really do some damage to Egypt." So they would have been fearful. They would have been in awe. They probably would have felt a mixture of fear and also comfort in knowing that God prepared a way for them to be safe from this plague. So how would they have felt as they anticipated what was about to happen? Anxious. I think anxiety was running rampant through Israel at this moment, through the nation of Israel, as they were all getting ready for this plague to happen. They were all preparing the lamb. They were all slaughtering it and preparing their houses. They were worried about their children and their families. So there was probably a lot of anxiety, which they would have to rely on what the Lord said would happen, that they would be safe from this angel of death. So then, in verse 24, we have a celebration beginning, and it says, "Keep this command permanently as a statute for you." So do this all the time. Do this every year. Do it permanently for you and your descendants. When you enter the land, the promised land that the Lord will give you as he promised, you are to observe the ceremony. When your children ask you, "What does the ceremony mean to you?" you are to reply, "It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, for he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians and spared our homes." So the people knelt low and they worshiped. Then the Israelites went and did this. They did this just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. Excuse me. So there in verse 26, The Passover ritual required interaction between parents and their children. This ensured that the parents would teach the truths of God's ways to future generations, that they would make sure to educate their kids about what was needed to be done. And then he struck the Egyptians. Parents would draw a contrast between God's wrath against Egypt and his compassion towards Israel. And so then the people worshiped. They knelt low. They gave a sign of humility and respect to the Lord. And this was their response. But this was also a celebration, a somber celebration, but they would remember this year after year after year, so much so that even when Jesus was going to the cross, the Passover feast was that weekend. That was the week of Passover. And so that happened thousands of years after the Israelites left Egypt. The crucifixion of Christ happened thousands of years afterward, and yet Israel was still practicing this. They were doing their part to keep that tradition alive. So why is it important for the older generations to share God's truth with the younger generations? Well, who else is going to teach them? Who else is going to teach the kids if it's not the older generations? No one will. They will be alone. They will be left to their own devices. They will be left to flounder. They will be left to err on their own. They won't be taught by those who are wiser than them, which is so important for us today, even, that we need to teach children. That's why we put so much emphasis on things like VBS and Kids Praise and RAs and GAs and Sunday school classes for kids and Sunbeam. We have all of these programs aimed and directed towards kids, preteen camp, so that older members of our church can go and teach those who are not yet members but are very young about Jesus and about the gospel, so that they can come to faith in Christ and be saved. Because without that, who's going to teach them? Who is going to step up into that place and take that responsibility? And then finally, we see the victory of the Lord over the Egyptians. Verse 29, now at midnight, the Lord struck every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and every firstborn of the livestock. During the night, Pharaoh got up, he along with all his officials and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud wailing throughout Egypt, because there wasn't a house without someone dead. So this wailing, they were crying out, they were screaming in anguish because of the death around them. So then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron during the night and said, get out immediately from among my people. Go away. Get out of here. I don't want to see you. Both you and the Israelites, go worship the Lord as you have said. Take even your flocks and your herds as you have asked, and leave, and also bless me. And so Pharaoh here in verse 32, he acknowledges the authority of Moses and the superiority of Moses' God. It's only temporary, but he says, by leaving, you will be blessing me because I've lost my son, and your absence will be a blessing to me because I won't have to go through any more of this. So Moses and Aaron, they trusted the Lord to bring victory to the Israelites, to bring this victory of freedom from slavery that they were in. What victory are you trusting God to bring into your life? What is it you're praying for? What is the victory that you are needing in your own life? And how can you trust him? Why can you trust him in that? What is the thing that causes you to have trust? Hold on to that, revel in that, relish in that, and continue to trust the Lord because he is good. He does do what he says. And as we see here, he's freeing the nation of Israel because he remembered their plight in Egypt. Now, they are going to have to go through the wilderness because they turned an 11-day journey into 40 years. Richard preached on this back in when he preached in Deuteronomy about how they turned an 11-day journey from Egypt to the land of Canaan into 40 years of wandering in the desert because of their disobedience to the Lord. And so Make sure that you're trusting in the Lord and that you're following him and that you're not turning an 11-day journey into 40 years, and also that you see the victory that he is going to bring you and that you trust him to do so. We look forward to Christmas. Tomorrow is our choir Christmas presentation called Song of Joy. I hope you will come and that you will bring your families to worship with us through such a great musical. It's going to be wonderful, and I really hope that you will join us for that, and I look forward to worshiping with you very soon. Bye-bye.